All right, let's kick it. Welcome to the Sobriety Diaries, friends. My name is Nate. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic and sober coach. My addiction has shaped the person I am today and given me the ability and voice to help others, and I simply wouldn't be here without it. Recovery is possible. The Sobriety Diaries is a video podcast where we talk to other recovering alcoholics and addicts. We hear their stories and hope to help others who may still be struggling. Head on over to the sobrietydiaries.com where you can apply to be a guest on the show and join our insiders list for early release episodes, exclusive content, and much more. Also, please share this podcast with just one person in your life who may still be struggling. You just never know what they may need to hear today. Happy Sober Day, friends. Thanks so much for downloading today's episode and for spending time with me today here on the Sobriety Diaries. We are sort of going in a different direction today with our guest, Megan Swan. She is a wellness and health coach who has, in her words, taken decades of self-hatred and really a learned behavior of alcoholism and sort of not your traditional path to recovery, and set forth on this path of evolution and really discovery about herself and plant-based living and natural energy, and turned it into, health and wellness, and in turn coaching other folks to better their lives. She shares some fascinating information about just the toxins that we're putting into our bodies and how we can change that. So I had a great time talking with Megan. So without further ado, let's open the diary on Megan Swan. Megan Swan, thank you so much for joining us today on the Sobriety Diaries. How's your day going?
So far, it's been great. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for your willingness to share your story. What inspired you to join us here today on the podcast?
Well, just that I think it's so important for us to talk about these things more openly. And I think many of us have had the experience that it's a family pattern of some sort. And if we make it a non-taboo topic and share our true experiences, I think hopefully somebody can relate and hear something a different way, because that was how it happened for me. I was circulating the concept for a long time, and it was just a certain few podcasts, a new idea that came worded in a different way that really made it click for me.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you never know what you will relate to in someone's story or who it may come from. We always look for the differences, I think, and an open mind and a good listening ear, I think, can go a long way. So great point. What we typically do here on the Sobriety Diaries is start with your story and walk through your addiction and your journey to recovery. And I definitely want to touch on the amazing things you're doing now. So why don't we walk through your story together?
Sure. So, I'll go back to the beginning, but then I'll probably skip. So I think it's important to point out that one of my first experiences with alcohol, first of all, was extremely young. Like one of my best friends who she's actually 10 years in recovery now. She and I started drinking. We would basically steal the vodka bottle out of the family bar and be hiding it behind the closet or the curtain at Thanksgiving dinner at something. Fortunately, we didn't do this all the time. It was when there was a quote unquote special occasion or something like that. But essentially, we were modeling what the adults were doing, not the hiding part maybe, but that alcohol was required for celebrating. And then fast forward, I got really drunk for the first time. I think I was 15, also with the same friend. We were on summer vacation. I won't get into it. But it was one of those experiences where I had my first blackout even.
Wow.
And then for my 17th birthday, my father and the girlfriend of his at the time allowed me to use her house to have a birthday party. And yeah, I basically spent the majority of the party on the kitchen floor. I have very little recollection of that. So the point is, it started really young. And I think another important thing to touch on there is the next morning, even the adults were sort of joking about, it being, I don't know, as you do, people that
Yeah.
drink, you surround yourself with people who just make it funny, these really
Right.
very
Yeah.
sad
It seems
happenings.
almost like it was a learned behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot that night, although obviously not really for decades later. But basically, from a young age, it was very normal. It kind of ebbed and flowed with, different groups of people I was spending time with in different scenarios and different music, scenes, all this, of exactly what I was drinking and to what extent. But it was definitely a part of my life for, well, until I guess I was 39 when I quit. And so it's been 3 years. I'm 42 now. Maybe I don't have the classic, rock bottom narrative in that. For me, a lot of clarity came. I look at it as a gift that with my first child, I mean, as you do, most women stop drinking or at least dramatically decrease, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um, and so I had this gift of time, if you will, of sort of socially acceptable sobriety, where the 9 months pregnant, and then it was really important to me to breastfeed, and so then there was like another 13 months, and then I was pregnant with my next, and then I breastfed him. So it was almost 4 years where I hardly had anything to drink, and but at the same time, I was really still at that point looking forward to getting back to some sort of point of partying, not to the extent, but enjoying numbing.
Yes.
And I never really found it in the same way, to the same extent, partly I think because uh, for those of you who are parents, you definitely shift your paradigm, and you're now like responsible for another human being, and sort of on the more flippant side, hangovers and motherhood do not go well together.
So I hear.
Yeah. But also, just, now you're the model for another human being. And, even though I modeled it myself, I swore to myself very young that I would never, quote unquote, parent or do some of the things that my parents did, such as drinking and driving with us in the car, which my dad did multiple times. And yeah, so I guess like my rock bottom was I drank and drove with my kids in the car. Even don't, I mean, I remember driving, but it wasn't, like it was, I really should not have been driving.
So internally, what was it like for you as a parent, and thinking back to your younger self saying, I will never do this. I will break this sort of generational, alcoholic way of life, and then seeing yourself continuing it? That had to be, hard to come to terms with.
Yes, very much so. But it kind of also fits in with this shame cycle that alcoholics are already in,
Yes.
so it was just like another thing that I wish I hadn't done the night before or said, or, like it'd been going on for decades, where I was pretty used to waking up at least on Monday mornings and having this, cascade of guilt and shame, and then like physically, of course, not feeling better anyway. And so that's where therein lies the cycle. But yeah, there was definitely this deeper disappointment in myself.
So I know that there was sort of a period of controlled drinking, if you will, or moderation. I talk to a lot of alcoholics who try that, maybe not in conjunction with early motherhood, but aside from the example that you wanted to set, what were some of the biggest challenges or internal struggles with trying to drink in moderation?
Basically, I knew I needed to stop drinking. I wasn't mentally ready to say I'm never going to have another drink again.
Mm.
So I thought I would test myself and see if it was possible to even control it. I mean, I was at this point in my life at whatever, the 38, I'm not like hiding alcohol in the house or anything like that. It's just, I think very common, 4 or 5 o'clock glass of wine with dinner. Like, it's just like it being a part of my life. And so I had rules, which were, I think I was only allowed to drink, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 nights a week. And there was a 2-glass limit. And, there's never a good time for these things, but it seemed to like fit into some sort of best time. And anyway, so my wedding was in February, and by March of that year, so I think there was maybe 9 months where I quote unquote tried to control it. But it was more of this internal narrative where I knew that, I really had to have that conversation with myself on more than one occasion of like, no, you said you're going to have 2, like 3's not 2,
Yeah.
5's not 2, like, and sort of maybe self-studying at that point as like, why is it so hard to, be at these social events and say no, and sort of bringing more awareness to that. So I guess I definitely think it was an important step for me. I don't think I would recommend it necessarily.
Yeah. So when was your last drink?
So that was the 17th of March, 2019.
2019. Great. That is an uncommon path to recovery, but I think a common feelings that alcoholics and probably mothers have, and I'm sure that a lot of listeners can relate to. So I think it's an important story to tell. So I appreciate you being here today. You had mentioned a long history of self-hatred. So aside from maybe the learned behavior aspect of alcoholism, what can you say about internalizing things or the self-hatred, I guess, that you mentioned?
I was always consciously drinking to numb out whatever I did not want to feel. And, it was dressed up as having fun or being more social or being more easygoing. Really truly believing, this is the sad, disempowering part, that I was a more enjoyable person to be around, drinking, maybe not drunk, but, being social in that scenario. But it was just so common where I'd have, whoever the trusted friend was in the scenario that I'd be calling the next morning and, rehashing like what exactly happened the last few hours.
Yes.
And there were multiple occasions in my life where it was something that, I was deeply embarrassed about, potentially really hurt someone or gravely damaged a relationship. And, it just builds up over time. And the other part is, it was also modeled to me to me, alcoholism is a very slow way of killing yourself.
Absolutely. Yes.
And that's kind of how I very tongue-in-cheek, sarcastically swept my father's suicide under the carpet, emotionally at least, 4 decades. So my parents got divorced at 7. My dad wasn't really he always drank, but it didn't become really problematic in his life, meaning, losing jobs, getting DUIs, being sent to jail even. All those happened sort of in my formative teenage years. And then he took his own life when I was 17. And so I feel like all of that was, so as a teenager and in my 20s, I had this very, jaded standpoint of life.
Yeah.
I think all teenagers have this sense of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, nothing can happen to you, invincibility, right?
Yeah.
I had it under the narrative of, if I'm meant to go, I'll go, and so made or didn't make many decisions based under this, like, if I'm meant to be here, I'll be here kind of attitude.
Do you feel like you were able to grieve your dad's death at the time, or were you already numbing with alcohol?
I grieved it to some extent, but because I wasn't like at 17, like I'd had the odd drink, but it wasn't like my,
Yeah.
but I certainly quickly shifted into that. So I partially digested it, but from then on took really decades to this day. I mean, I'm coming to terms with different aspects. I had sort of a breakthrough last year, realizing how I've really painted my entire narrative of my relationship with my father from the lens of, the last 6 months of his life, when in fact he taught me many, many wonderful, beautiful things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's an ongoing process. And yeah, I mean, I think it's the number one thing most people use alcohol for, is not feeling how they want to feel.
Absolutely.
My health coach that I had at the time was an integral part as to why I even got to the point where I was facing the reality that in order to be a integrated health leader, how it works with most health coaches is you try something, you try it on for 2 weeks. And so I said, all right, I'll try it on for 2 weeks. And it just kind of, blossomed from there. Through watching how it was to be a health coach, I decided that's something I could do. And it was really a nice way to integrate lots of things that I'd done over the years. I've been a yoga teacher for a decade, and I love teaching yoga, but at some point, at the decade point, I was well aware that I didn't want to just do that for the rest of my life. So it kind of worked out beautifully to get into the wellness space in a broader sense. I got certified to be a yoga teacher and sort of live this double life, which I actually heard someone else on a podcast the other day. Basically, like Ashtanga yoga tends to attract the type A personalities. And so I was still going out Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings, I was doing 2 back-to-back hardcore vinyasa classes, just, sweat out all the alcohol, the poor people around me.
Yeah.
As to mean that was like balance for me at the time. Obviously far from it, but you got to start somewhere. Right. So yoga was actually maybe the first way and world that helped me be more conscious of like what it even meant to take care of myself and why that might be of interest.
Yeah. So we connected on Instagram, and we had been talking about the podcast and your wellness focus, and you had said, I noticed that you're up in the wee hours of the morning a lot. And I was like, damn, she's right, I'm busted. And we continued the conversation about how my sleep cycle is just completely really non-existent at this point. And you made some great suggestions, a few that I'm trying on, to use your words, and I've already noticed a difference. And no caffeine after 3 p.m. And I have added an additional, so I meditate in the morning, and I've been doing like a more calming meditation at night as well, like an hour before bed, and no phone an hour before bed. So why don't we talk about Nonalcoholic Glow and how we can benefit our listeners?
Sure. Well, Nonalcoholic Glow is a project, sort of a side project at this point, but we have big plans.
You and me both, girl. Let's talk about it.
It was birthed out of an idea. A friend of mine, actually the one very close friend that came out of taking the certification to be a health coach. She and I did it at the same time. Her name is Lily Sokoloff, and she had come to me multiple times actually during the pandemic saying, it is crazy here in the US. Like, people are drinking every day, all day. Like, it's just gone out of control. She said, like, it was sort of like that was the standpoint at first. And then months later, it came to be more personal, where she had reflected on how it was interfering, or it certainly wasn't making it easier, her current relationship. And she was never a drinker, let's say, but I think that's more the point with our project, is that, you don't need to quote unquote have a drinking problem to dramatically improve your quality of life by cutting it out. And we wanted to focus on the positive. And so we got together with the Cork Brothers, who I believe it's mostly a podcast, but basically it's a group of guys that just sample non-alcoholic beers and talk about it on a podcast. But they're so high vibe and so fun. And then we partnered with Sexy AF, which stands for alcohol free.
Yes.
Spirits, and they're based out of Calgary. So again, hats off to Calgary. We just had this experience where we started this new idea. The few people we got involved were so giving of their time, so interested in supporting us, and that's one thing I really like about the sober community. And every day there's more events that are sober, or attract just for sober people, or are very much more inclusive. Now that I travel here in Mexico, it's not so common, but every time I've been outside and been in the States, or when I went on a honeymoon to New Zealand, just like so many places have a fun mocktail menu these days. And I just find it so encouraging. So Non-Alcoholic Glow, the initial idea was to present a challenge for anyone who wanted to take a break, let's say, from alcohol for 14 days. And we will do more of those in the future. But we have multiple ideas. One I can share, it's literally just an idea at this point, but some sort of app filling a space in the sober movement that's not being served to date. And we have lots of ideas of what that might look like. But
yeah,
we're just excited because it was such a high vibe experience. People were so, we didn't have thousands of people beating down our doors, but people, and sometimes people that you don't expect to be quote unquote sober curious.
Yeah, the whole sober curious movement, I think, is huge right now. So I love that you guys are doing that. And I look forward to seeing more from it. Thank you.
It sort of fits perfectly. I mean, one thing that I do with all my clients is help them reevaluate their relationship with all sorts of everyday toxins, be it sugar, caffeine, gluten, all sorts of things. And everyone is so different. So, people have different experiences, and, it really needs to be a decision you make on your own. But by doing these sorts of challenges, it really gives you the gift of clarity, that you can see, how do I really feel? How does my body actually operate, taking that out of my life? And it might surprise me.
And react to these things that we are ingesting. I think that's a good segue, because I wanted to touch on plant-based living and sort of the natural energy side of things. So I think that fits in well.
Sure. Well, all those things that I mentioned. So alcohol, certainly highly processed, but in general, all animal products, dairy, caffeine, and alcohol, all these things basically oxidize your cells. So translation, they rust your cells, they're killing your cells, whereas not only fresh, but plants, legumes, vegetables, fruits, seeds, nuts are bringing oxygen to your cells. They're doing the exact opposite. And then you have all sorts of products that are antioxidants, that are basically potent superfoods, or even just foods like blueberries would be in that category, are doing the same thing. And it really is a balance that's unique to the individual, to see how you're best in your thrive mode, if you will, versus, feeling lethargic. You have any one of those everyday toxins that's pulling down your energy or oxidating your cells more than you're bringing life to them on a daily basis. It's a balance that it's going to run out over time, if you will.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to point out, that I kind of had this realization more reflecting on my experience with my dad living out the last years with you, is, an extreme alcoholism. This reality that when we stop focusing on what we're eating and our nutrition, and really taking care of ourselves in other ways, because of the alcoholism, we do become different people. All these things shape not only how we're feeling directly on an emotional level, but it can really shift how a person thinks. And I think it's a really important aspect of recovery to support yourself in that way, to find, a nutritionist or a wellness coach or a health coach to help you find balance. I certainly don't think you should be going on what's classically thought of as a diet. It's all about adding in healthier things to what you're already doing and not restricting yourself. But finding what I like to talk about as intuitive eating, like this calm, happy, healthy approach to what you're eating, and feeling that you seek nourishment and even maybe connection with your food, with the environment and where it comes from. And all of that will help support you physically, emotionally, and spiritually throughout the recovery process. It's more of an energetic reality that the more that you consume these things that are basically your body they can process them, and arguably in some cases, like with organic beef, there are benefits that they're getting out of that food, but it's zero fiber, so there's like an added cost to the body to process it, if you will. And if the balance is off and you're eating more of that versus things that bring energy, hydration, fiber, and nutrients to the body, then basically over time it becomes harder and harder to meet that same natural energy level that you felt, in your 20s, let's say.
Ah, the 20s. I look back fondly. Well, I guess it depends how I look back. If it were those Saturday and Sunday mornings, probably not fondly, but... So I know you have an upcoming program that you're launching. Why don't you hit on that and tell folks where they can find you online and on social media?
Sure. Thank you. Well, you can find me at meganswanwellness.com, my website. I'm a big fan of Instagram, and so that's the main place. If you want to chat, hit me up in the DMs at Megan Swan Wellness. And the program I'm launching is called Align and Shine. I just ran it. In fact, I'm about to finish running the first version in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to launch it again in September. So if you're looking for some high vibe community for the fall this year, it's a hybrid. So it includes one-on-one coaching combined with group coaching. And then I bring in 12 guest experts. And the last Align and Shine was very much focused on mindset and empowerment. We talked a lot about masculine and feminine energies, and we talked about human design, EFT tapping, sort of all sorts of things that can help you shift your mindset. This time I'm actually going a little bit back to my roots and focusing on embodiment, and the experts are all going to be more on the side of, ways that you can physically embody also empowerment and basically a deeper level of self-acceptance through movement. There's a pelvic floor health specialist. There is a trauma-informed coach. All of these things that can build on you finding new levels of clarity. Of course, there'll be lots on the mindset, and always there's the baseline wellness, but it's going to be really amazing. The last group of ladies is spectacular, and I'm so looking forward to running it again.
Great. Tell me about this EFT tapping. A few of my followers brought it up, and it's kind of fascinating to me, but I don't really know much about it. Can you give me kind of a brief rundown?
Sure. Well, it is emotional freedom tapping is the acronym there. Basically, there are pressure points that are along the meridian lines that are helping you shift your mindset around something. So generally you do 3 rounds. First, you voice the thing that either the fear or how you don't want to feel. And then you do another round suggesting to your subconscious how you could think differently or feel differently. And then the last round, each time you do a big inhale and exhale and kind of reset. And then the last round, you would do the high vibe version of how you want to think or feel. And it really works. I mean, if nothing else, you feel high vibe right
Yeah.
after, kind of buzzing.
Yeah.
But, if you do it on, like everything, it's ideally daily, but, you're doing it regularly, you're going to feel high vibe and in
Amazing.
control of your thoughts patterns.
Well, I think this is just perfect for our listeners. Recovery is so much more than not drinking. And I think it's about evolving and being a better version of yourself. And all of this plays perfectly into that. So, Megan Swan, thank you so much for your time today. And let's keep in touch, my friend.
Yes, Nate. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Thanks so much for listening today, friends. Huge thank you to Megan Swan for being so open and informative about recovery and wellness. Hopefully you heard something that resonates with you today. And if we help just one person, our job is done. You can find all things podcast related and subscribe to our show at thesobrietydiaries.com, youtube.com/Nate Kelly, where we upload today's video podcast, or on Instagram at the Sobriety Diaries Pod. Check back soon for new episodes with new stories to tell. But until then, try your best not to drink and be good to yourself. Bye, friends.